What did you want when you were this age?
A train set.
Really? Do you know much about train sets?
I do, actually, and we just got a new model in last week. It's hand-built with hand-painted cars. It's a limited edition of 5,000. You might have seen it on the way in over by the elevators. I would show you, but I'm sort of confined to this desk.
At this point, 4 episodes into our Queer Cinema Spectacular, the story of the making of Carol in 2015 is incredibly familiar. In 1996, the playwright Phyllis Nagy was enlisted to adapt her friend Patricia Highsmith's novel.
I didn't read it while she was alive because it seemed such a personal book to her, and I didn't want to have the discussion with her about the book in case, you know. I had been used to reading certain kinds of lesbian pulp fiction where bad things happen and there's not any kind of suspense in terms of the romance between women.
Price of Salt, a 1952 semi-autobiographical romance story into a screenplay. However, it would be more than 2 decades before Carol would be made into a movie. Originally set to be produced by the British company Film 4, it was quickly pushed into that much-feared development hell.
So did 10, 15 years of the politics of the world change the script that you ended up with?
No, actually, and that may have contributed to why it took such a long time, because the script was this fixed thing, not in its, you know, it changed constantly, but in its aims and its objectives and its refusal to become an agenda-based script.
This should be a familiar timeline, as it's true for Yorgos Lanthimos is the favorite as well. Call Me By Your Name also had over a decade of development, but that might just be because the film's producers and writers kept falling asleep while working on the script. In the case of Carol, it's a story that somewhat mirrored problems that followed the original The Price of Salt. The incredibly controversial author Patricia Highsmith had originally written The Price of Salt under the pseudonym Claire Morgan and had gone incognito to Coward McCann, an ironic name considering it was Highsmith's regular publisher, Harper Brothers, that had refused to publish it, calling the lesbian romance career suicide for an incredibly promising young author, who had just started her novel career with an amazing accomplishment. 2 years before, Patricia Highsmith had written Strangers on a Train, which in 1951 was adapted by Alfred Hitchcock into a film that's now recognized as a classic of queer-coded cinema.
Want to hear one of my ideas for a perfect murder? You want to hear the busted light socket in the bathroom or the carbon monoxide in the garage?
Neither one. I may be old-fashioned, but I thought murder was against the law.
What is a life for 2 guys? Some people are better off dead.
By compromising and writing The Price of Salt under a pseudonym, Highsmith continued her career, which would lead her to invent the character Tom Ripley, the con man of the talented Mr. Ripley fame. Phyllis Nagy met Patricia Highsmith in 1987, and they quickly became close friends. Highsmith was not easy to get along with. She was allegedly an alcoholic, suffered from both mental illnesses, eating disorders including anorexia, and a variety of physical ailments. She was often accused of being a misanthrope, a misogynist, a racist, and an anti-Semite by various people. Patricia Highsmith was a resolute friend of the Palestinian people at a time when that cause was the nadir of its popularity. And she banned her books from being sold or published in Israel, and traveled to various countries under pseudonyms to write tracts criticizing the Israeli government. In her book, People Who Knock on the Door, she wrote a dedication to the courage of the Palestinian people and their leaders in the struggle to regain a part of their homeland. This book has nothing to do with their problem. The book, inspired by the rise of the Christian right and evangelicals like Jerry Falwell, ironically had quite a bit to do with their problem, as we now know. Her relationships never lasted too long, and she preferred to live alone. These traits had completely solidified by the time she met Phyllis Nagy. And when the novel was finally republished in 1990 under Highsmith's name and retitled Carol, various producers began thinking about adapting it to the screen. In 1996, Nagy officially took the project on. Although Highsmith had died in 1995, she had encouraged Nagy to adapt her works into plays. She had also adapted the talented Mr. Ripley into a stage play.
So, and she didn't talk about the book in the way that she would speak about a book like The Talented Mr. Ripley or Deep Water or The Glass Cell, even. And so I thought, oh, we'll just leave this here on the pile of Pat's books to read. And she certainly had a lot of them. And I was so surprised when I read it. It's such a dangerous, radical work of fiction in many ways, in this unassuming, plain-spoken package. But it really packed quite a wallop.
Phyllis Nagy knew that Carol was deeply personal and semi-autobiographical. Highsmith had the idea to write it while she was stuck working at Bloomingdale's to pay for her psychoanalysis. She saw a glamorous blonde woman in a mink coat shopping at the store and started writing when she got home. The irony of Highsmith's Bloomingdale's experience was that she had been hoping that therapy would cure her of her homosexuality, and instead ended up having an affair with her therapist. The character of Carol was based on this therapist, Catherine Hamill Cohen, and a lesbian Philadelphia socialite named Virginia Kent Catherwood. Catherwood had lost custody of her daughter in a divorce proceeding after a lesbian tryst got recorded by a private investigator. The young innocent girl working at Bloomingdale's, Therese Belivet, was based on Highsmith herself. The Price of Salt was noteworthy for being the rare lesbian romance novel with a happy ending. Phyllis Nagy wanted to make sure this film captured Patricia Highsmith's original intention.
And as time went on, naturally I became the, Father Time of the project, along with Tessa Ross and a couple of other people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we had, several of us had much more of a vested interest in seeing that it was made well and that certain elements of the story and the script were preserved, which, they were.
By the time it got out of development hell, Phyllis Nagy wasn't just a screenwriter, she was also a director. In 2006, she wrote and directed the made-for-TV movie Mrs. Harris, starring Annette Bening and Ben Kingsley.
No one else, no other group is allowed, is asked to not just be in a movie. Even criminals and serial killers are allowed to just be who they are. And it's taken us this long to get something done where the women just are who they are.
While in the process of development, Berwin and Nagy were told that it wasn't the homosexuality that producers saw as a problem, it was the fact that two women would have to lead the story. Again, echoes of The Favorite. Producers who were trying to make LGBTQ films, and they did exist, were trying to make a different type of gay film, agenda-driven, not simply a romance between two women.
Maybe 10 years ago, it could have been made if we'd made that kind of change to the script, and had the rousing speech about rights or God knows what else, and that's probably what it would have taken at that time. But now, or 2 years ago when it went into production, that was no longer the case.
Different filmmakers, Kimberly Pierce of Boys Don't Cry fame, Stephen Frears, even Kenneth Branagh, revised, considered, and then rejected. Phyllis Nagy's producer on Mrs. Harris was the one who broke the logjam. Elizabeth Carlson acquired the rights after they lapsed for Verwin, convinced Phyllis Nagy to come back on board, and by 2012 had cast Cate Blanchett and gotten an Irish director, John Crowley, to sign on. It seemed to be going ahead until John Crowley dropped out unexpectedly. Pretty upset and confused, Carlson turned to Christine Vachon, a producer friend. She knew about another director, Todd Haynes, who had just lost his star on his upcoming project.
It came to me all as a package. The book, which I didn't know, the script, Kate's attachment to the project, Sandy Powell's attachment to the project. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty luxurious package, to say the least, when it came my way. I went off to the Oregon coast, I read the novel, I read the book, I read the script, and the novel is so fantastic.
Carol stars Cate Blanchett as Carol, every bit as glamorous, bored, and headstrong as any 1950s socialite. The film version of Carol notably takes the action a few years later than Highsmith's book, in order to get the full effect of HUAC and the accompanying lavender scare of this period.
Where's the tape, you son of a bitch?
Therese is played by Rooney Mara, wide-eyed, innocent, and charming everyone she meets of both genders. Carol is a great character, expertly played by Blanchett. She's Lydia Tarr without the musical talent or power, roaming the department store in her spare time and chain-smoking. I'm not sure completely how I feel about Therese. Patricia Highsmith seems like such an interesting character in her own right, but at times it feels like Therese is just written to be a mirror of most of the character's wants and desires. In some ways purposely so. She's a lost soul trying to figure out who she is, but sometimes I just wondered if it was too blank a slate. The movie is really well shot, stylish, romantic, nostalgic, and also melancholy. Throughout the movie, the romantic glances and close-ups make for a very stylistically charming movie. Sarah Paulson plays Abby, Carol's former lover. Kyle Chandler plays Carol's husband, Harge. And for Teresa's suitors, Jake Lacey plays Richard, and John Magero of Past Lives plays Danny. The central question for Carol is really a heartbreaking one. Herself or her small daughter, who she loves very much. It's easy to forget how much control a man had over a woman in the 1950s, especially at a time when homosexuality was considered a mental illness, punishable even by jail time if caught in a public place. And by adding the comparison to HUAC, Phyllis Nagy reminds us how common life-ruining results could be. We often hear about women in the 1950s and 1960s struggling to have it all, but a better question would be, will Carol have anything at the end of this tough divorce?
You know, there was a time when I would have done almost anything. I would have locked myself away to keep Brindy with me. What use am I to her, to us, if I'm living against my own grain? So that's the deal. I cannot negotiate anymore. You take it or leave it. But if you leave it, we go to court. And if we go to court, it'll get ugly.